What's up, guys? So today I figured I would do a video, as you can see here, on a whole bunch of fountain pens. But specifically this is going to be my top 5 fountain pens for 2014. I believe in around like March of 2014 I had kind of done like my top 5 pens of 2013 into 2014. That was kind of my first year of getting back into fountain pens and like seriously buying them and maybe like collecting them, so you can say. But since we're fresh into 2015, I figured it hasn't been quite a full year since I did that last video, but I might as well just start this on like a yearly basis, and I guess we'll see how long these fountain pen videos last. But as you can see here on the bottom, if I remember correctly, these are the top 5 pens that I had designated in that March 2014 video. And all these pens up top here are the pens that I have acquired since that video. So effectively these are, my purchases in terms of fountain pens for the year 2014. And nothing that I really had before these top 5, before that last video, has made it back into my current top 5. But there have been some swaps in terms of the new pens that I've gotten in 2014. So just to backtrack, for the last top 5 was Pilot Custom 74. This one is the clear demonstrator with a medium nib. Shaper Balance 2. This one is in cobalt blue. I have here a Rexall eyedropper filled pen from early 1900s. My top favorite pen, my Pelikan M600 in black and gold trim, and this is a Pilot 78G. So in terms of changes, actually quite a few changes. Basically the Pilot Custom 74 is out from the top 5. The Rexall eyedropper is out. And honestly, even the 78G doesn't really have room in my top 5. So these two are still remaining in the top 5. And I will kind of go over the pens that I've gotten new, and I'll kind of let you know which ones have taken over for those 3 pens. So in no particular order, these are I just happened to randomly grab them from a variety of pen cases, and I just kind of put them on this counter. But left here is my first custom pen and my only custom pen, a Sean Newton Sumter in black hard rubber, black ebonite. As you can see there, not the factory, well, not factory, but not the nib that Sean puts in. Sean, at least when I got this pen made, I had a Jovo nib put in. Right now I actually have a Knox nib in here, which was just a loose nib that I happened to install into one of the Jovo nib units. So that's that pen. Here is a Montblanc 149. This is a 1980s version with the... Oh my god. It's so hard to focus on everything. With a two-tone nib, not the tritone, and this, let me just make sure it's not inked. This one happens to have the plastic threads, not the metal threads. So early 80s, early to mid 80s, kind of like in the transitional period, has West Germany on the clip. The two-tone nib, no picks on the cap ring and no markings underneath the clip. Okay, and then here is a Shaper Balance. My friend had actually gotten this for me for my birthday. Wow, this is not going to focus. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You don't really have to see this such a huge overview. But so Shaper Balance. I don't really know all that much about this, but it's still nice. I had made, obviously my top 5 was this Shaper Balance 2. This is like the original vintage version of it. So there's that. Next here is a Schaefer Imperial 4. Wow, okay. So having all that stuff in the background, not that great for focusing. Schaefer Imperial 4 with a touchdown filler. And this is like a really like fine, almost extra fine stub. Clip that with a 14 karat gold nib, not an Imperial with a steel nib. This is a Levenger True Rider series in their Kyoto finish. Great. There we go. I kind of got this pen because, you know, anyone who has seen probably the last top 5 video as well as the video I made on the Schaefer Balance 2s knows that one of the versions was called Aspen. Was it the Aspen? Yeah, it was Aspen, and it was actually very similar to this. You know, like amber with, you know, blue flecks in it and stuff. And I really like that. There was more red though. It was more red and blue. This is a little more amber and with like larger patches of blue and not really red at all. But the Aspen Balance 2, I still kind of want one. Last I saw on the market, and there aren't, believe me, there aren't that many of them. The Cobalt Blue is probably the most common one of the Balance 2s. And then the Schaefer Jade Balance, which is at the end over there, is probably second most rare of the Balance 2s that I've seen on the market. And Aspen, I've seen one go on sale since I found out about these pens and kind of wanted to get them, and that went for like $350 shipped. So I don't, you know, I decided to get this True Rider. I forgot if I put a video on this or not. I think I already did a video. I didn't do a video for all of these pens, but a good majority of them do have their own videos. So next, Pilot Vanishing Point with a medium nib. And next here is a Pelikan 400. I think 1940s. Or maybe 1950s is when this was made. Very nice in tortoise. You know, I had fallen in love with the M800 brown tortoise, and when I got the tortoise pattern, you know, obviously this is a lot less brown than I would hope for. The thing with the tortoises, you know, especially the old ones, is that you had a lot of varieties in how the striping was and stuff, and the coloration in striping. So this one, not as much brown as I would have liked in it in terms of flecks. You know, you can see some browning in it, but it's mostly pretty pale, and definitely not like a brown tortoise. Next up here, Sailor 1911M, or Standard, I believe, depending on which market you're This gotta be an easier way of doing this. I feel like an idiot holding up my hand. There we go. 1911M, or Standard. I believe in the US market it's called the Standard, but in the Japanese market it's the M line. Here I have a Parker 51. Before this, obviously, I had shown, you know, I had a Parker 51 in teal with an aerometric filler. This one is actually a vacuumatic with actually a very fine nib. It's kind of like between like an extra fine and a fine, but it writes relatively dry. So I want to say it writes almost like a fine. I don't know. I may tune this to write a little wetter. You know, I had complained that my gold-filled cap Teal 51 wrote way too thick. And actually, over here I have another Parker 51, and that writes just a little too wet. But this actually writes a little too dry for my taste. And it is a vacuumatic. I'm not crazy about vacuumatics. They're kind of a pain to flush out, so it's definitely not a pen that you're going to want to change colors very often with. But I think once I make it wetter, this will probably be one of my go-to 51s to write with, and I'll probably use it more often. As of right now, it is actually filled up with a Mont Blanc Royal Blue, and I have been using it. I got this fairly recently. My friend had given it to me for a Christmas present, just this past Christmas, you know, a week or two ago. Okay, next up, Pelikan M205. I bought this pen mainly because I started getting a lot of Pelikan pens, and I didn't really have a lot of Pelikan nibs, and I determined that Pelikan is probably my favorite brand company. In fact, I have like a spare nib unit on my desk right now, but I didn't have enough bodies to kind of use all these nibs, so I got this as a general purpose body. I'm not crazy about the 200 series size for Pelikan. I feel like the length of it isn't too bad. Like, for how I hold my pen, the length is fine. I don't even need to post it, but the diameter is a little too narrow for my liking for regular use. But if you actually look at the nib, I actually have a 14 karat gold nib. You're definitely not going to be able to see it. But this was a oblique medium 250 nib, I believe. And it was cut by Mike Masayama to be a right foot oblique from the standard left foot oblique. And this pen actually, this nib actually came from this Pelikan 600 here that I gotten from my friend. Generally, I don't write with oblique nibs, but he does. And when he sold me the pen, that was the nib that came with it. So I kind of just swapped over to it. I've been steadily working on the nib a little at a time, over the past few months that I've had the pen. Next up here, Pelikan M250 in brown tortoise. This one was, I believe, made exclusively for Levenger. Now, there was the Pelikan M400 brown tortoise, and then they also, obviously, a few years ago, made the M800 brown tortoise. They had also made a M600 brown tortoise. And one of the things I've always lamented about is that there was no M600 size brown tortoise, and there wasn't. There was an M600 brown tortoise, but it was back during the first generation of M600. The M600 came out in like 1988, and then they switched off in 97, I think, to the larger size, well, the current size that it is now. But back then, the M600 was M200/M400 sized, only with like additional gold trim. And I believe the brown tortoise M600 didn't sell that well, and what they ended up doing was they ended up taking the extra barrels that they had and made this 250 as a Levenger, as an exclusive for Levenger back in the day. And one of these popped up. Obviously, I couldn't really quite put the money down for an M800. I don't really like the M800 size all that much, but I do love the brown tortoise, so I picked this pen up. And by the time I'd gotten this pen, I'd been writing with the 205 for a while, so I knew like I could write with this size. It just isn't most ideal, and it's not my favorite size Pelikan, but I could still use it. So I decided to get it. I got this for a pretty good price. I think I paid like $130 for it, brand new in box. It does come with a 14 karat gold medium nib. Actually no, is it a medium or a broad? Oh, it comes with a broad nib actually. Yeah, so it's quite big. I can barely kind of use medium nibs as it is right now, so broad nibs kind of out of the question. But I have so many nib units, I can always swap them around. And with the broad nib, I have a lot of tipping, so if I ever choose to do any kind of grind on it, I have plenty of tipping to work with. But next is Pelikan M600. This is actually a blue demonstrator. Now, most of the blue demonstrators that are out on the market right now is the marine blue that came in the 605 with the silver trim. This is actually gold trimmed, which I think looks better. I prefer the gold trim over the silver trim for the 600 with this blue demo plastic. But I think it was kind of made out of the same material as the M800 Blue Ocean, but in 600 size, and I think it was an exclusive for like Sony. I think they made like 2,000 pieces or so, and I was fortunate enough that my friend actually owned one of these, and I had been kind of staring at it jealously for several months, and then eventually he decided to sell it to me. And this pen actually had that that right foot oblique 14 karat M250 nib installed in it, which I swapped out. Currently, right now, I have just a standard modern 600 tritone medium nib on there. Next here, another Parker 51 in black with a lusterloy cap. This one is a fine 14 karat gold nib, and this is an aerometric. The aerometric shroud is actually badly corroded. I actually got this kind of as a parts pen. The cap that it came with, not this particular cap. The cap that it came with had a screwed up jewel in it that someone stuck like a toy pink piece of crap gem, like fake gemstone in it with like poorly done epoxy. So my friend managed to source this proper period cap for this pen to replace that. I thought I got a good deal with it, but the cap, the way it was, the pictures weren't that clear, and it was sold for parts, to be fair. At first I thought I got a great deal for it, but then after having to source another cap for it, not that great of a deal. Actually pretty comparable to a lot of 51s that you can find, except with the very poorly corroded aerometric squeeze shroud. But oh well. It is a fine nib, but the tine gapping is a little wide, and so it writes really wet and a little thicker than I would like for a fine nib Parker 51. Next here is a host. I think this is made by Airmail, I think, but it's an Indian fountain pen. One of the Fountain Pen Network members actually buys these pens. He's actually in India. These are Indian fountain pens, and what he does is he taps the sections out to fit either Esterbrook nib units, or in this case, Pelikan nib units. Actually, I think they both have the same threading tap size, but I'm not sure exactly. It's an eyedropper filled pen, as you can see. I use it for my spare Pelikan nib units. This was obviously before I got the 205. The price on this pen was like $25. I figured, a cheap host for my Pelikan nibs. Right now I have like a double broad italic stub that I had cut. I screwed up a grind on a double broad M200 steel nib, and I basically cut off all the tipping and shaped and smoothed out the the leftover steel material into like a really broad italic. At first I thought this would be a great spare host for all my nib units, but not so much. The way that the threads are tapped, it's actually really tough to screw the nib units in and out. So I think, considering how broad and wet this italic nib writes, I'll probably keep it with this eyedropper. And whenever I want to swap bodies around, obviously since then I've gotten the 205 and the Blue Demo 600, and actually I can swap some nibs into the into the 250 Brown Tortoise as well. But for $25, not terrible, I guess. I did email the guy who tapped out the section and suggested to him to maybe see about using, just having a little more clearance just to make the nib units a little easier to remove. Because as of right now, you almost have to kind of really force the nibs to screw in and out, which isn't most ideal, and if you're not careful, you can do damage to the nib. And at how tight it is now, I would not put a gold nib in there, just for fear of damaging the gold. A steel nib unit, yeah, $30, it would suck to get damaged, but it's still not like a $100, $150 nib unit. Here I have a Noodler's Conrad in demo. I do not have the standard flex nib in there. Right now I actually have another Knox nib. It fits in there. It's a little big, but it does work. It fits fine. I specifically got this for, what was released a few months ago, J-Bond's new limited or special edition Stormy Gray. And after I saw what it did to this pen and the leftover gold glitter and flecks that remain in this pen after flushing it out really well, I will not be putting that ink in any of my other more expensive pens. But, I got this kind of as a tinker pen. I do have several nib creepers. And the nice thing about the Noodler's pen is that they're really easy to maintain. They are a little finicky, but me getting into the practice of tuning nibs and stuff, I don't really mind. And you do have to use a little bit of effort to make them write well, especially if you want to use the flex nib units. But in the case where you're just writing it with a standard ball nib, no problems. It's very easy to actually tune it to get it to write well to how you would like, so long as you know what you're doing. So for $20, a bigger pen than the Nib Creeper, obviously has that funky smell, so not all that great. But in term, I can actually write. This pen is actually sized quite similarly to the M600, so I can actually hold on to this pen for quite a while and write with it long periods with no issues. Versus with the Nib Creepers, it's a little tough. Those are a little too narrow for my taste. And finally, last pen that I bought this year, actually that's why it's all the way at the end, is a Sheaffer Balance 2 in Jade Green. My friend had one. The same friend who sold me the Crimson and the Cobalt Balance 2s that I have. He has one of these. It's basically his favorite Balance 2, and he was not willing to sell it to me. This color is hard to find. And although funny enough, I got this for what I would consider a pretty decent price off of Fountain Pen Network, especially compared to one or two of these that I saw at the DC Pen Show this past year. This was brand new in box. It comes with a squeeze converter, which is a little weird because I'm pretty sure these normally come with the twist Sheaffer converter, but not a big deal. I have Sheaffer twist converters. But I fell in love with this coloration, and it's tough to find. After I bought this off of Fountain Pen Network, another one popped up on eBay for around the same price. Also in new condition. Actually even better, because instead of just having that red clamshell box, it also had the outside box, and it also had the proper twist converter. But not a big deal. I bought this right away. Like, the guy only had like maybe 10 views on his classified listing, and I messaged him right away asking, oh, do you still have that in stock? Because I really wanted it. I didn't think I'd see another one so soon again. But yeah, so those are, quick or not so quick overview of the pens that I had gotten in 2014. Now, in terms of top 5, let's just move all of these up. I'm not going to even include the green balance. Actually, why not? Well, I haven't really used it yet, so it's not really fair. But obviously, this falls in the same vein as the cobalt blue balance. So, remainder in the top 5. Pelikan M600, actually overall still my favorite pen. Sheaffer Balance 2, again, very nice. It's a lot flashier than the M600, but I love how it writes. I love the size and the weight and the balance of it and everything. So that makes the top 5. In terms of like a vintage top 5, this obviously, the Pelikan M400 Tortoise has replaced the Rexall eyedropper. Nothing against the Rexall, just in terms of my vintage pens, I preferred this Pelikan a lot more. It's a lot easier to fill because it's a piston fill pen. It's also thicker. The Rexall eyedropper is really, really thin, and it's a little tough to write with for extended periods of time. This pen does not have a very flexible nib. I don't mind. I'm not a huge flex nib kind of guy. It's nice to have a few flex nibs, but definitely doesn't have to make my top 5. So, that's why it's not in there. And this Pilot Vanishing Point I got. This actually replaces the Custom 74. I love the Custom 74, but it's so similar to these two pens that I don't really think it needs to make the top 5. And honestly, the retractable clicky of the Vanishing Point kind of just takes the cake. And for me, the clip placement isn't an issue. I mean, I have my own nitpicky fit and finish issues with this pen that I kind of went over when I did its own separate video earlier in the year. But just the novelty of it, the practicality of it, I use this at work quite a lot. Just because, when I fill out data sheets, I'm not writing for a long period of time. And to be able to just click the pen open and close without having to twist off a cap or even pull a cap and keep track of having a cap there since I don't post, definitely makes it a very convenient pen to use. And finally, this blue demo would make top 5, but it's basically the same line as the M600, so I'm not going to include that. Last pen in the top 5 would have to be my 149. My 146 did not make my top 5 for last year. I like the 146, it's not bad, but it is a little back heavy. One of the big complaints that I have with the M800, the M1000, the modern 146 and the modern 149s is that I feel they're a little too back heavy. This 149 with the plastic threading, it also has one less piece in the back behind the threads that is also made out of plastic. So it's only lighter by maybe a few grams. It's not that much different. But when you hold it in your hands, you could just feel this is not that heavy. I feel this is a much more balanced pen than the modern pens. Some people like back heavy pens, some people don't mind. Yes, I can write with a back heavy pen if I have to, but it's definitely not my preference. So this definitely takes the cake. And you know, it's actually a big pen. It's very comfortable to write with. It's very comfortable to hold for long periods of time when I'm writing in like, you know, when I'm doing long, extensive writings for hours at a time. This is probably the pen that I will go to. The 600, I think I've mentioned. I like it overall as my favorite pen because it's a combination of things. It's a good compromise where it's not too small, but it's not also not too big. I will admit writing with a bigger pen is more comfortable, but carrying this pen is a little more difficult, especially versus carrying this pen. So that's why this takes overall favorite, but in terms of longer writing comfort, this pen takes the cake. When I got the Sumter made, this was made to my specifications. As you can see, I kind of had it made very, very close to a Pelikan 149, not a Pelikan, a Mont Blanc 149. Capped and uncapped, it's the same size as an M600. You know, uncapped, it's also the same size, but it is thicker. It's as thick as the 149. The only reason why this doesn't, you know, and obviously the ebonite material, I really like how comfortable it is to write with. But the only reason why it doesn't beat out the 149 is two things. The piston, obviously, I like the piston fill more than the cartridge converter fill. In this case, I have it in converter. And I also like the nib more on the 149 than I do here. Granted, I could have gotten an 18 karat gold nib, you know, fit with this pen. But I have no real experience using Jowo's 18 karat gold nib units. I believe they're stiffer. I know that they make a 14 karat gold nib unit that Binder likes to modify for flex, but I've never seen anyone sell that 14 karat gold nib unit other than through Binder with his flex modification. So just out of pure nib performance, I prefer the 149's 14 karat gold nib over the steel nib, any steel nib that I could put into this custom Sumter. So there we go, kind of a long video, but you know, I did get a lot of pens in 2014. I don't see myself getting as many pens in the future anymore, but here are my top 5, just overview. Oops, 80s variant, Mont Blanc 149 with the plastic threads, Pilot Vanishing Point, Pelikan 400 in tortoise, and leftover from last year, Schaefer Balance 2, and my Pelikan M600, overall favorite still. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and